campaign season is in full swing, and so I thought it would be a good time to take a look at everyone's second favorite candidate from The Wire, after, of course, Clay Davis himself. When he's first introduced, Tommy Carcetti is a young, charming, and politically shrewd councilman. It's hard not to like him. He's friendly, genuinely seems to care about his constituents, his fellow council members, and it seems like he's trying to do a good job despite the difficulties of navigating the political landscape of Baltimore politics. Early on, he still has a sort of starry-eyed look of hope in his eyes. He's close with his peers, especially his future opponent Tony Gray, as the two often play racquetball together as they discuss the internal happenings in their districts, but as Tommy becomes more ingrained into the system, he becomes much more distant and aloof. In the third season, despite his young age, Carcetti shows off his shrewdness by making moves, particularly by building alliances with people within the police department. As he gains connections, Carcetti, an already ambitious person, starts to set his sights on becoming mayor of the city, something many others believe is impossible. When he finally does make his intentions to run official, it creates a rift between him and others, fracturing his relationships with previous friends, particularly Tony Gray. During the fourth season, Carcetti is on the campaign trail and not having as much fun as he thought he would. The roller coaster ride leaves him questioning whether he actually has a chance to win, and even if he does win, if he'll have the impact he wants to have because he's fed up with the status quo. When he finally wins the election for mayor, Carcetti becomes reinvigorated, believing he can make the change that the city needs. Season 5 is basically a snapshot of Carcetti's rapid descent from a hopeful and inspiring man of the people to just another talking head, worried about what's next for his career rather than the good of his constituents. But what causes Carcetti to go down that path, and what makes him turn into just another ambitious politician? When we take a closer look at Carcetti, we can see that he, like most politicians, start out with good intentions, but get trapped in the cycle of always wanting more power. Baltimore, not unlike other major U.S. cities, has long had issues with corruption, policing, community engagement, and drugs. Here's a few stats about Baltimore. The poverty rate is consistently above the national average, sometimes as high as double. This year, in 2024, there have been 34 homicides already, though it is down from 46 at the same time last year. In 2018, the homicide clearance rate was less than 50%, with police making an arrest in only 44% of homicide cases. Baltimore has always been a hotbed of corruption going all the way back to the 19th century. More recently, in the 20th and 21st centuries, Baltimore's political class has been embroiled in scandals from past mayors facing accusations of taking bribes and kickbacks through the influence of organized crime to more recent times, such as with former Mayor Sheila Dixon being convicted of embezzlement and former prosecutor Marilyn Mosby, who is facing possible jail time due to fraud, and on the list goes. There are several factors that have contributed to such a corrupt system. One of the main reasons is its political culture. It is defined by protecting special interests, kickbacks to the lobbyists, and union corruption. Just think back to Season 2. Even someone at a low level like Frank Sabatka was trying to bribe officials just to keep his tiny union alive. This corruption leads to the whole business as usual, where only the political class benefits, the citizens lose hope, and become less engaged, allowing the corruption to become more rampant with no oversight. The idea of we've investigated ourselves and cleared ourselves of wrongdoing is the standard, which of course leads to a permanent underclass that is constantly in poverty. So why bring all this up? Because it sets the stage for what Carcetti is up against. Even if he does have the support he needs, it would be an uphill battle for him to make any significant changes. In Season 3, there is a scene in which Colvin takes Carcetti to Amsterdam to see it for himself. After taking him to a well-attended community meeting, he asks Carcetti why he's there. Carcetti responds because it's interesting to him, and he's on the Public Service Committee, which Colvin clearly sees through, knowing that Carcetti is really there because he sees it as a political opportunity. Colvin relates a story about an old racist that he respected because, as he emphasized, he knew where he stood with the man. When they arrive at Amsterdam, Colvin tells Carcetti this is a walk he'll need to take for himself. As he's about to get out of the car, Carcetti asks Colvin, in almost a sort of smug way, "Aren't you coming?" as if he's about to take a leisurely stroll through the park. Colvin responds that this is a journey he needs to take on his own, in a more serious tone, as if to ask Carcetti if he really is ready and if he knows what he's getting into. As Carcetti makes his way through the crowd of drug users and dealers, he is in disbelief. Earlier, he asked Colvin why he did it, and Colvin explains to him that he wanted to actually do something. Carcetti, it seems, comes to the realization that actually doing something means they have to be okay with getting their hands dirty and doing the hard things. It reminded me a bit of the scene in Training Day when Alonzo was explaining to Jake that he needs to have a bit of dirt on him for people to trust him. This leads to Carcetti essentially making his intention to run for mayor at the next council meeting, where he talks about the change needed in the broken system. In his speech, he rebukes the constant excuses and self-satisfying shirking of responsibility coming from the Royce administration. He passionately describes the problems and consequences of not taking real action to solve the problem. The speech resonates with the audience, who applaud his conviction. Carcetti seems to make all the right moves and say all the right things, but he ends up being exactly what he said he would not forgive. Early on in his tenure as mayor, he sets his sights on police reform and zeroes in on Daniels. He starts by doing what all good leaders should do. He reaches out to the rank and file, listens to them, and acknowledges the need for changes. The problem for Carcetti is he does what all bad leaders do as well, which is blow smoke with no real action. From the get-go, Colvin and McNulty seem to have Carcetti pegged and are skeptical of his promises, with McNulty even publicly calling him out for saying what every politician has said in the past with no real solutions. It takes Daniels a little while, but he figures it out soon after Carcetti is just another part of the political swamp that is Baltimore. Politicians always have the same two excuses as to why they aren't able to accomplish what they said they were going to. They don't have enough time, and they don't have enough money. Carcetti's campaign goals and higher office ambitions are always tied to what should happen rather than something actually achievable. In the private sector, or in the actual working world, most organizations require SMART goals. SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. Politicians never have SMART goals. Their goals are always vague, not measurable by a specific metric, and are hardly ever time-bound. When Carcetti is meeting with his campaign team, they discuss what issues he should take on. They decide to stay away from education, get the murder rate down to around 275, and keep his good looks, and they'll be looking at a potential governor's run. Picking these apart, notice how issues are like buffet lines. A little bit of this, a little bit of that, not this or not that. None of these, save for getting the murder rate down, are specific, and as Colvin puts it, how do you hide a body? It's not really an attainable goal unless, of course, you juke the stats. In Season 5, though things are not running very smooth for Carcetti, he's already got his sights set on the governor's office, where he knows that when he wins that, then he'll be able to make the change he wants to. Again, more time and more money. How many times have we heard politicians make grandiose claims? They will promise to stop hate, stop discrimination, end entitlements, or whatever. It's never specific, and they'll never tell you how they're going to do it. We tolerate and accept this from politicians, but we would never condone this from people we work with. If a person you work with never produced results but kept getting promoted, what do you think would happen? That person would probably be resented by others, it would make management look incompetent, and may even cause people to quit. In politics, this is par for the course, and we accept it as normal. Politicians are not going to make your life better. In fact, they are only going to make your life worse because there is no incentive for them to improve your life. They aren't going to stop people from hating you or ensuring people like you. Assume anyone running for office is doing so to enrich themselves, not their constituents. Think about it like this. If you were working at a branch of a company and got put onto a committee that represented your branch with people from other branches, you would be there to make sure your branch's needs are heard and accounted for in the decision-making process. You wouldn't be on that committee and then be able to just say what you personally wanted. Your job would be to report back on if you were successful or not in getting your branch what it needs. If you are not successful, your boss or the branch president may just remove you from that committee. This is what politics is meant to be. A politician is representing the people, not leading them. Politicians like Carcetti have a complex where they believe they are called to lead, but it's called public service for a reason. Politics is a game where you constantly fail up, which is why it is the antithesis of business. What it really comes down to is marketing. Politics is the game of giving a pile of crap enough sex appeal to convince people that they need that pile of crap to run their lives. There's not one thing a politician can do for you that you can't do better for yourself. This is ultimately what sets Carcetti against Daniels and Colvin. Amsterdam wasn't the best thing in the world, but it was making some difference, and in spite of knowing that, and rather than looking bad, Carcetti and Royce both tried to use that for political gain. What little goodwill they had built up with the community came crashing down when arrests were made. Where Amsterdam was located was demolished. Later, the school shuts down Colvin's special project due to budget cuts and pressure regarding the state exam scores, further abusing the trust Carcetti had. When he tries to make amends with Bunny, he deservedly receives a cold shoulder. Carcetti was a well-known councilman. There was no reason he couldn't have still backed Bunny to ensuring he kept his pension, salary, and benefits, but again, he decided it wasn't politically expedient. So what do we as real leaders need to keep in mind this campaign season, and what can we learn from Tommy Carcetti? First, politicians are not leaders. They don't lead anything. They are really meant to do what they are told to by their constituents. We need to drill this into the minds of people around us who want to argue that change rests upon electing someone into office. Second, assume that no politician is there to serve anyone other than themselves. Politics is not meant to be a career position, but how many people today who are in office that have never accomplished anything in life other than work in government want to tell people who actually build things how the world should work? Again, the act of failing upward is common in politics. Be wary of anyone who has never done anything in their life except hold political office. Third, listen carefully to what a politician says. Listen to them as if you were listening to a subordinate giving you a status report on an assignment or task. If they can't articulate things with specificity, such as time and cost, then they don't know what they're talking about. Fourth, pay attention to what issues politicians choose to focus in on. Just like Carcetti was warned which ones to stay away from, there are ones that politicians in the real world also gravitate toward. Find out why they choose some and ignore others. Dig into their history with certain issues. It'll give you a good insight as to why they're interested in a particular area. Do they really understand it, or are they using it because it's the topic of the day? I fully expect this year's election to be a complete bleep show, as most big election years are. However, if you start by breaking things down a bit more and look past the big speeches, the bloviating, and dig a bit deeper, you can find out who's for real and who isn't. A good metaphor for Carcetti's rise from a well-intentioned councilman to just another swamp creature is the game of Battleship he plays with his daughter. In Season 3 and 4, Carcetti is in the game as someone who truly believes he can make a difference. As time goes on and things get a little difficult, he starts to falter. Remember, when we first meet Carcetti, he seems like an upstanding guy who wants to make a change, but behind the scenes, he's still just a smooth-talking guy willing to cheat on his wife. When it comes time to do the actual work, though, that's when he wants to quit. He doesn't even want to make campaign calls to donors. When news comes out that he's not doing well in the polls, he all but checks out and is more focused on the game with his daughter. This is the problem with so many politicians. It's all a game to them. They'd rather play games than actually put in the hard work. He tells Norman, "Is there any way I can win? That game is pretty much over, but this game right here could go either way." When Carcetti attends the wake of a young boy who was shot, and when he walked through Amsterdam, he was somber and took things seriously because at that time he felt he could win. Once he started believing he couldn't win, he began the games. After winning the election, Tommy got serious again. He met with Daniels, he went on ride-alongs, he made speeches to the police department about making changes, but when things got rough, the game started up again. He began dismissing requests by promising things would be better in the future. He got petty with various city departments who got on his bad side. Servant leadership is not about only doing the right thing when you have a chance to get what you want. In fact, true integrity as a leader means doing the right thing regardless of what you get out of it. Our cities and country has been stuck in a cycle of failure for too long because of politicians like Tommy Carcetti. It's not that Tommy was evil or even corrupt. It's that he consistently put himself over the people he meant to serve while convincing them that they needed him more than he needed them. He was indifferent in his convictions unless things were going well. The world is overcrowded with politicians like this. They don't serve Baltimore well, and they don't serve anyone else well either.